So for my topic for this analysis paper, I chose a pretty difficult, complicated topic to intertwine with organizational communication, but I think it's very interesting, and it's regarding the NFL and their organizational communication styles and how that intertwines with the fact that players in the NFL have been accused and convicted of domestic violence and sexual abuse, but they're still allowed to play in the NFL with little or no penalty to them. And on the other hand, players have non-violent offenses where they're banned for life for the NFL. So that's kind of what I dove into here. And so, to start, multiple aspects of the NFL's organizational communication system through the years has reinforced and made normal the fact that players can be accused and sometimes convicted of abuse, but somehow they're still allowed to play in the league with little to no suspension of pay or play. And this will kind of analyze that issue through the lens of organizational identity, ethical decision making, and leadership styles. So to start off, organizational identification is defined as being separate from the employees that make up the organization, and the organizational identification includes the culture, values, and goals of an organization, and how communication reinforces that. And so, through research that I've done, the NFL really lacks consistent identification when it comes to their stated values and what they actually practice in regards to the dealings of players who are involved with domestic abuse. Actually, this is from the Borland textbook, and they talked about the NFL as an example in organizational identification issues, and that it's extremely tough for the commissioner to build a connection and consensus with all 32 owners of the NFL, and that's essential for creating a strong organizational identification. And so with issues like domestic violence in the NFL from the players, it's hard to come to a conclusion with everybody involved on changing policies. And so the organizational ID is one big reason why I think that policy hasn't changed. It's because the culture and the values and the goals are so different from the commissioner down to all the owners that it's really hard to come to a consensus on this issue, and it's really come from outside sources in recent years. So my next point is through ethical decision making. And so there are decent rules and mission statements regarding the ethical behavior and holding players accountable and to a higher standard above anyone else, but it's not shown as much in decision making from leadership. And so when punishments are given as lenient, or when punishments are given that are lenient for players who commit domestic or sexual abuse, that public relations as well as internal communication to the league keeps reiterating that the leadership lacks concern with the issue. And so, for example, in recent years they've made an example of a couple NFL players. Instead of giving them just a typical one-game suspension for being convicted of sexual abuse, the commissioner put them on his exempt list and suspended them the entire season. And it's been seen to be more of a public relations stunt to show that those decisions can be made ethically in the NFL, but there are still tons of examples of where that's still not happening as much. And another ethical dilemma in this decision making is, for example, you get a 1-year suspension for one positive test of marijuana versus a maximum of 6-game suspension for domestic or sexual abuse accusations. So ethically, this makes no sense to me, and the values guide decisions, and this shows a lack of ethical value the NFL has. And they're definitely looking at it from a deontology approach of doing what's the most good based on established rules and principles. And the bottom line, in the NFL's opinion, is these policies are in place, they're hard to change, we're not changing them, so no matter what happens, we're sticking to our stated goals. And the bottom line of the NFL is revenue generation. And so they will stick to they will guide their ethical decision making to their bottom line of revenue generation as well as the established principles in place. So ethically, it's tough for them to not go against their stated policies. And another example of a questionable ethical policy is that the NFL will not suspend players for past actions regarding domestic abuse or sexual abuse if they're unable to determine that players actually violated the personal conduct policy. So the NFL, if there's an accusation from before a player was ever in the NFL will look at it, and if it doesn't violate their policies, they will not suspend the player. And so communicating that not only internally but to the public as well, it shows all of us through their communication that their ethical decision making is based solely on the deontological approach of going by the established rules and policies that are already in place. And the last one I looked at was leadership. And so, in my opinion, and from what I've read and found out, they failed to live up to the best practices, especially of identifying core ethical values and aligning those with the vision, mission, and their social responsibility. And so, the mission of the NFL is to unite people and inspire communities in the joy of the game by delivering the most exciting sports entertainment experience. And their responsibility is for every member of the NFL community to embrace their unique leadership role in society and assumes the trust, character, and responsibility that comes with that role. And they bring fans from communities from all walks of life together and celebrate the game they love, balancing the authenticity of tradition with the power of innovation. And so, and their values also respect, integrity, responsibility to team, and resiliency. And so you can kind of see they do tailor to uniting people, bringing people together for the game of football, and doing things the right way. And the integrity part is one of their values that the leadership is not aligning their communication and their decision making with. And so their integrity part is all about doing the right thing even when no one's looking. And through these decision making processes, through dealing with players who have committed violent crimes and sexual crimes and not dealing with them as seriously as they should be, their leadership is completely going against one of their highest stated values. And also, up and down in the NFL, the type of leaders they are just transactional leaders. And this is defined as someone who motivates by contract and reward, promising followers rewards for good performance, and focusing on rules and procedures, which is exactly what I stated earlier. And that the bottom line is these players sign contracts, these coaches sign contracts. You get rewarded by doing your job, and you focus on the established rules and procedures. So, in conclusion, there's multiple dimensions of the NFL's organizational communication strategy surrounding domestic and sexual abuse amongst players that need to change in order to hold players accountable. There are no small instances where punishments have been increased, there have been small instances where punishments have been increased. I apologize. For example, the Adrian Peterson and Greg Harding the last couple of years, who were given year suspensions instead of one-game suspensions, but those aren't really enough. The NFL needs to communicate internally and externally, if they are going to make change, that it's going to be across the board and there will be a no tolerance sort of policy. And so their decisions so far to address this issue have been mainly through public relations and media to keep up their image. And the biggest need is large cultural change, which will start with changing policies and communicating those policies to every team in the organization. And they have been doing some good things recently. The commissioner has pledged to donate hundreds of thousands of dollars to national organizations dealing with victims of sexual and domestic abuse, stuff like that. So they are sort of trying to get their image back up and starting on the right path of doing the right thing. But it really comes down to their leadership, ethical decision making, and finding that organizational identity if they really want to make a lasting impact.